Hi, welcome to Ms. Cooper's art class. Today I'm going to be showing you how to paint hair in a couple of easy steps. I'll show you straight hair, wavy hair, and then curlier hair. As just a baseline, this is great for beginners. This should take about 4 to 5 steps depending on how you like to paint and how thick your paint is. I'm using acrylic paint if that helps as you're getting started. You're going to need some paint. I'm using acrylic. You'll need some canvas, and I am using a round brush from just kind of any round brush will do. It just helps to be a little fluid when you're painting the hair colors. Now the colors I chose are yellow ochre, burnt sienna, raw umber, white, and just a little bit of black, but depending on the hair color you're painting, you might use something completely different. If you're painting blue hair, just grab some blue, and you'll need some white and some black. For all hair types, you're going to need some kind of base coat just to establish that hair does exist there. I chose to mix just some burnt sienna and raw umber, just make a brown color. When you're painting straight hair, you can just paint a bunch of straight lines that all touch each other. For wavy hair, you do want to start kind of defining some waves, like paint definite waves on top of each other instead of just a blob. For curlier hair, you can just paint some smaller blobs or circles together. For this base coat, I did 2 layers. You can see me adding the second layer of brown, and the bottom row has just a little bit more of an ombre look to it. I chose to use some more yellow ochre at the bottom, in case you're wondering why I have this painted on here twice, just so I can reflect on some slightly small changes you may need to make depending on hair color. Once your base coat is dry, and I really do mean like pretty much dry, you're going to add some white paint. This might seem a little bit harsh at first, but it's a good way to establish your highlights. So on straight hair, what you're going to do is thin it out with water or just naturally by dry brushing it. You're going to use your round brush to fluidly paint some straight lines that go with the general direction of the straight hair. This will give you some highlights. Now you're going to leave some brown in between each streak of white. You're not just painting this whole thing white again and undoing the brown, you're just painting some individual hairs that are a bit lighter. It helps if you get these into a chunk because that will better reflect the way that light bounces off of straight hair. It tends to bounce in a chunk. This could be kind of the top to side of someone's head where light generally tends to hit it. You'll notice people with straight hair tend to have kind of a stripe of highlights that fits in that area. So once again, you can see there are some streaks of color. I'm not just painting it solidly white. If you add too much white, you can always paint over it a little bit later. Wavy hair is a little different. This one, again, you want to start defining those waves as you paint. Build up a wave pattern. I have 2 sets of waves that kind of crisscross each other and go over each other. They're forming a bit of a letter Y that does not have any highlights in the middle at all. I just left it brown. This is what gives it some depth and makes it look like the individual kind of waves, noodles, wiggles of hair are going on top of each other. And I will repeat this again at the bottom. You can see I'm defining one wave that kind of crosses over all of them with the highlight, and I've got another one that goes underneath. So I'm just interrupting the highlights there and then bringing it back around. Some highlights are a little lighter than others too to help kind of round out those pieces of hair. For wavy hair, once again, similar process, but I'm going to make sure I'm defining some of those tighter waves and curls. This is where a reference photo helps. Some people have very kind of regular, even curly hair that has a similar curl pattern throughout the entire head. Some people kind of have a mix of waves and curls going on. If someone has really coily hair, some of these details will be much smaller. So this is just kind of the basic idea for curly hair is you'll want to put a bunch of C shapes that kind of crisscross each other and go different directions. I have lots of C shapes, and occasionally I'll have something that goes a different direction, but if you stick to C's, you should be good. Sometimes it helps if you rotate, and it especially helps if you have an actual reference photo to look at, so you can imitate the C-shaped highlights that are present in the original photo. I also like to put a couple more highlights towards the edge of the hair, for me on the left, whatever you would define as like that outer part that is not near the face, because that part will probably get a little bit more light. But I kept highlights pretty consistent throughout. If it was the top of somebody's head, you would probably see highlights over most of the hair. Let's move on to our next step. I'm using my black paint now, and I'm going to define those highlights a little better and add some contrast by painting some black paint in the areas where I didn't put white. Now I thinned this out, I'm not glopping it on, I'm using it very sparingly, just in little areas between the streaks of white or on that background. There's plenty of brown hair here. This is just meant to add some shadows and give this hair a little more dimension and contrast. It makes it stand out a little bit more. You might use more of this color towards the face or the neck, wherever the hair touches the person and the light is blocked. Now, if you're painting somebody's hair that is a much lighter color, black might be a little too dark. You can always just use a darker version of their hair color. You can see with the waves I'm going in between. You know that Y-shaped I talked about with the highlights at the top? Well, I've painted some black in the middle to help define those waves. That black hair doesn't suggest that the hair disappeared, it just pushes it into the background, gives it a shadow, kind of like where it crisscrosses, and I just added more black. This will give it more shape. With wavy hair, it may help to practice this off to the side if you have some extra room or if you have some extra paper to kind of practice on, or you can go nice and slowly. You don't want to go too fast. You don't want to lose that definition. With the curly hair, same thing. I'm going to push some parts into the background by adding some black just in between those chunks of waves. Not too much on the actual white areas, just a little bit to push it, give it some contrast. This is making it look a little bit cartoonish, but it's also making it pop a little bit more. It looks less like white designs on a background and more like there are actually shadows in the hair, and it might be moving and have depth. Now, this is not the last step. There's still some more, so do make sure you stick around for the next part where we will define this a little better. You'll notice at that blonde part, I just used a dark brown, by the way, so it wasn't too dark. Okay, so our next step is adding that color back in. I'm going to mix some burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and some raw umber, and I'm just going to kind of mix them all together in kind of random ways at the top just to get a variety of colors in here, because this imaginary person has some blonde and brown. I thinned out the paint just by kind of dry brushing it on. You could also use water, and you can paint it over that black and that white just to tone it down a little bit. You can see there are clearly still highlights and shadows, but now those highlights and shadows are actually hair colored. You can leave some white showing through, of course, if you want to make it pop just even more, but it does help when you add that hair color over the top. What color you add just depends on the hair you're painting. You know, if you're painting blue or green hair, then you can just go for those colors. I chose a little bit of blonde and brown because this imaginary person has both. When I'm painting those waves, some areas I'm letting stay really brightly highlighted. Some areas I'm toning down a bit, adding a little bit of a shadow with that color. I'm going to do the same thing here on this wavy to curly to coily kind of hair sample. I'll add a bit more. I'll add a little bit of extra shadow maybe towards some of the edges or towards the bottom where the light might not reach as much. And this is what's really starting to bring it to life. It's not perfect. It's almost there, but adding the color is going to help significantly. This is again where you may want to test a couple colors off to the side. Make sure you've definitely mixed the correct hair color for the person before you go in and do this step. All right, this last part is my favorite part. This is what makes it look more realistic, and this is the stray hairs. You're going to want to thin out your paint again, however you like to, and even for straight hair, you're going to add just a couple background hairs that generally go with the general shape of the hair, that kind of go with the group, but they pop out into the background. The more you look at people's hair and examine it as you paint it, the more you'll notice people do have some stray hairs. A little bit at the bottom, a little bit of feathering out helps, those stray ones out the side, and then even with your highlight color, just a couple hairs that don't quite go the same direction as the other ones. Even on straight hair, there are just a couple hairs that don't follow the others, and that is what gives it a little bit more of that realism. I'm going to do that again on the bottom one, just a couple extra stray hairs, just to build up that realism, and I can even add a little highlighted hair. Some people have a mix of hair textures as well, so straight hair might have a wave might have a curl or a coil or even a straight bit coming out from it. With this wavy hair, I'm adding a couple pieces that fly away from the hair and pieces that flow with the hair, because wavy and curly and coily hair tend to have a mix. I'm also going to add a couple dark ones, and then with my highlights, I'm going to go a little bit wilder, and I'm going to make it go a completely different direction compared to the other hairs. This is actually what my own hair tends to do towards the bottom when it gets long. So I'm referencing my own hair here. With my kind of curly to tightly wavy to kind of coil sample hair here, I'm going to add a couple darker hairs towards the bottom and towards the sides to give it some shape and connect it back to that main mass of hair, so I don't end up with kind of a cartoon shape hair. So it looks more realistic and has a little bit of fluff to it. And then I am all done. Thank you so much for watching. Please type any questions or comments below. Like and subscribe for more. Thank you for watching.